their old age. You're not honoring them. That's the example, the specific one that he uses. And so every such type of reasoning or influence that turns us from the Word of God is hurtful, and it's ruinous to the church. And again, I think that's why there are so many different religious groups today. Time after time, the theories and ideas that different men have been placed on an equality with the commandments of God. And millions have been turned from the pure truth. Is it hard to start your own church? It must not be too hard if there's, 45,000 like James had been telling us. What do you have to do to start a church? Well, several years ago, I don't know if Carol's going to remember this or not, we used to like to go to a restaurant called Mimi's that was on Memorial Road. It's gone through 2 or 3 other iterations now. I think it's called something that has to do with the bear. Black Bear Diner now. But we liked it when it was Mimi's, and we used to go there quite a bit. And we were sitting there one morning, I think, and there was a table of ladies right next to us. And they were not quietly, because we didn't have to really strain to listen. They were running down people where they attended church. They didn't like how the communion was done. They didn't like what was said at baptisms. And what it finally got down to is they said they were going to rent a building, hire a preacher, and start a church. These appeared to be ladies of means, and they had a plan, and they were ready to do that. They would just start their own. And so it's not that hard, if you've got the money, to start your own church. And I think that's what's done in many instances today. People go out. I've seen married couples decide, hey, let's start a church. And they do that. And so the reference in verse 15 is similar to the use of meats offered in idols that Paul was dealing with in Romans chapter 14. If you remember there, Paul is dealing with if you're invited to a feast and don't worry about what is set before you, what kind of meat is set before you, looks good, smells good, eat it, enjoy. But if a brother comes up to you and says, wait a minute, did you not know that was meat that was once offered to a pagan idol? You can't eat that. Then what were they to do? They were to refrain. They were to not eat it because of the conscience of that brother who had brought that to their attention. So in anything we do, the heart must be pure to make our service acceptable to God. If the heart is defiled and the life is sinful, then the service is not acceptable to God. When the mind and the conscience become defiled, we're talking about hard, self-satisfied, impenitent to the last people. And Paul calls them unbelieving at the end of verse 15. Now, these are Christians, at least they're calling themselves Christians in whom he is talking to. But what does Paul call them? Unbelieving. But they were sitting in those pews or on the floor or wherever they sat in those congregations. And so that's what's sad. They profess to know God. They claim to be his servants. But whenever someone turns from God's laws and teaching, he's actually denying God. And that's why Paul has to refer to them as unbelievers. He also calls them detestable. And that's an interesting word because the only time that word is used in the New Testament, it means hateful, disobedient, cannot be persuaded, will not comply. So it's a term used for the rebellious and those opposed to the law. Worthless, he also calls them. Unfit. They are unfit to do God's work. And so this is what Titus has to deal with. I don't know how much of this Paul told Titus before he left. He wrote the letter back to him. I hope it wasn't the first time Titus knew what he was in for. I'm sure it wasn't, because Paul had been there for quite a while and Titus with him. But this is what he's got to deal with. And so as we go through the rest of this book, we need to keep that in mind. He's given one of the most difficult jobs that is described in the Bible, dealing with such people. I think our time's up. All has come back on. Everything's rebooted. Looks like we'll be good to go for church. Thank you for your attention this morning. And we will be ready to start in chapter 2 next week.
You had another minute, that's all right.
Yeah, you're right.